My name's Emily, I'm 26 years old, and I'll never forget that Christmas. Some families gather around the tree and exchange gifts, but in mine, money was the real present, or the weapon, depending on how you looked at it. I was sitting on the couch in my parents' living room, watching my dad slide a folded check across the coffee table to my older brother, Daniel. The glow of the Christmas lights reflected in his glasses as he grinned and said, "That should cover the last of your student loans, son. Merry Christmas." Daniel's face lit up, like he'd just won the lottery. He had been drowning under that $20,000 debt since graduating, so I understood his excitement. What I didn't understand was what came next. My dad turned his eyes to me. I still remember the way his smile flattened, how his tone sharpened just enough to cut me down without anyone else noticing. "Emily," he said, "don't forget you still owe us $1,500 for last month's expenses. When do you think you'll be able to pay that back?" I froze. My mom was refilling wine glasses, pretending not to hear. Daniel didn't even look my way. And there I was, sitting with barely $200 in my checking account, being reminded of a debt that wasn't even real. It was money I had spent on groceries, gas, and household bills when I was staying at their place after losing my job. I laughed it off, or at least tried to. "I'll figure it out," I said, my voice catching in my throat. But deep down, I felt something snap. The unfairness burned through me. My brother got a $20,000 bailout, and I was being shaken down for pennies compared to that. I knew in that moment that I couldn't stay. So before New Year's Eve, I packed my car with 2 duffel bags, my laptop, and the last pieces of my dignity. I didn't even leave a note. I just drove. 6 months later, I hadn't spoken to them once. Until the day I opened my phone and saw 29 voicemails from my so-called family. And that's when the real story began. When I left my parents' house that night, I didn't have a plan, just a bitter determination to never let them humiliate me again. I drove west until the highway signs blurred together, the Christmas lights of the neighborhood disappearing in my rearview mirror. I ended up in Columbus, Ohio, because my car broke down outside the city. I took it as a sign. The first few weeks were brutal. I slept in my car for 3 nights before I scraped enough cash together for a dingy room in a shared house. I picked up shifts at a diner, minimum wage, plus whatever tips I could charm out of truck drivers and exhausted office workers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Nobody there cared about my debt to my parents, or that my brother was the golden child. I was just Emily, the girl who poured coffee and hustled for every dollar. I kept my head down, worked doubles when I could, and taught myself budgeting like my life depended on it, because it did. I had exactly 2 luxuries, a prepaid phone and a cheap notebook where I wrote every dollar I earned and spent. By spring, I'd saved just over $2,000. That may not sound like much, but to me it was proof that I could survive without anyone's handouts, or their manipulation. That's when I started thinking about revenge. Not the kind you see in movies, with fireworks and dramatic confrontations. I wanted something quieter, sharper. My family thrived on control, on making me feel small. My revenge would be freedom, becoming someone they couldn't ignore, someone they couldn't claim credit for. So I picked up a second job at a warehouse, working nights after the diner. I barely slept, but I didn't care. Every paycheck was a brick in the foundation I was building. And little by little, I felt my old self return, the version of me that had dreams, not debts. By June, I was exhausted but proud. Then one evening, after a grueling double shift, I pulled out my phone to find 29 unheard voicemails from my family. My stomach sank. I hadn't spoken to them in half a year, and suddenly they all wanted my attention. I pressed play on the first one, bracing myself. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, my uniform still smelling like fryer oil, staring at the glowing 29 on my voicemail icon. My thumb hovered for a long time. I knew those messages weren't left out of love. My family only reached out when they needed something, and after 6 months of silence, I was sure this was no different. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I hit play. The first voicemail was from my mom. Her voice was syrupy sweet at first. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. We miss you. Things aren't the same without you around. Call us back, okay?" I almost laughed. She hadn't called me once in 6 months, not even on my birthday. I swiped to the next message. This time it was my dad, his tone clipped, like he was leaving instructions for a contractor. "Emily, it's your father. We've been trying to reach you. Call me back immediately. There are some family matters we need to discuss." I rolled my eyes. Family matters, his favorite way of saying things that only benefit us but you'll be guilt-tripped into handling. The third message made my jaw tighten. It was Daniel. Hey. Look, I know you're upset, but we really need to talk. Things are kind of falling apart here. Please, just call me back." I kept going, one after another, listening to their voices shift from polite, to insistent, to desperate. By voicemail 12, my mom was crying. By voicemail 21, my dad sounded angrier than I'd ever heard him. And then came the last one, from Daniel again. His voice cracked. "Emily. I know we haven't treated you right. I know you probably hate us. But Dad made some bad choices, and now it's bad. Really bad. We need you. Please." I set my phone down, my hands shaking. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. After all the times they'd ignored me, mocked me, dismissed me, they were calling me, begging me. And for the first time, I realized something. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they were weak. And I had the power now. The question was, how was I going to use it? I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling, Daniel's words looping in my head. Dad made some bad choices, and now it's bad. Really bad. By morning, I decided I wasn't going to call them back. Not yet. They'd taken my silence as weakness before, now, it was my leverage. Instead, I did what I always do when something doesn't add up. I started digging. The first step was simple. My dad, Richard, owned a small construction company back in our hometown. I knew the name, the website, even the office address. Out of curiosity, I typed it into Google. The first result nearly made me choke on my coffee. Local contractor sued for fraudulent billing practices. I clicked. There it was, in black and white. My dad's company was under investigation for overcharging clients and cutting corners on projects. The article mentioned potential lawsuits, unpaid debts, and possible criminal charges. I sat back in my chair, my hands gripping the mug. Suddenly, the voicemails made sense. They weren't worried about me. They were drowning, and they wanted me back in the house to, what? Help? Bail them out? Be the scapegoat? I pulled up Facebook next, scrolling through Daniel's profile. He'd gone quiet, too, no new posts in months. But one tag from an old friend caught my eye, a picture of Daniel at a casino, chips stacked high in front of him, a beer in his hand, dated just 3 months ago. My brother, the one who had his $20,000 debt magically erased, had clearly picked up a gambling problem. And if Dad's company was tanking while Daniel was throwing money at poker tables, it explained the sudden desperation. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the powerless one. They were the ones on the edge of collapse. And me? I had nothing they could take from me anymore. But revenge wasn't just about watching them fail, it was about making sure they felt it. And if I played this right, I could turn their panic into my victory. The question was, do I confront them directly, or do I let them stew while I plan something smarter? For days, I couldn't shake the image of my dad's name splashed across that lawsuit article, or Daniel's smug grin at the casino table. It was like the universe had handed me a front-row ticket to their implosion. But the question remained, what role did I want to play in it? The easy part of me wanted to march straight back into that house, slam the article down on the kitchen table, and watch their faces as I told them I knew everything. But that would be too quick, too messy. Revenge is like cooking, you don't take it off the stove before it's ready. So, I made myself wait. Instead of calling, I started collecting screenshots of the lawsuit filings. Copies of unpaid tax liens I found through county records. Even Daniel's casino pictures. Every piece of information went into a neat little folder on my laptop titled Winter Payback. At the diner, between shifts, I'd jot down ideas in my notebook. Little ways to push them deeper into their hole. Anonymous tips to creditors. Quietly forwarding the lawsuit article to their church friends. Maybe even calling a few of my dad's business partners and letting them know the kind of man they were tied to. But then I'd pause. Because beneath the anger, a small, stubborn part of me still remembered those rare moments when Dad wasn't barking orders, or when Mom brushed the hair from my face when I was sick, or when Daniel used to sneak me snacks past bedtime. Those memories made it hard to push the button all the way. That's when I realized something. My revenge didn't have to be their total destruction. It just had to be their realization that I didn't need them anymore, and that without me, they were nothing. So I started sketching out a plan. I wouldn't just confront them. I'd make them come to me, humbled, desperate, broken. I wanted them on their knees, admitting the truth they'd never said out loud, that they had used me, belittled me, and cast me aside. And when they finally said it, that's when I'd decide whether to forgive, or finish what they started. The first step was patience. If I jumped too soon, they'd sense it. No, I needed them to reach the point where pride couldn't stop them from crawling. I stopped listening to their voicemails for a week. Every day, more notifications piled up, but I ignored them. That silence was my weapon. I knew exactly how my dad operated. Control was his oxygen. By not answering, I was cutting off his air supply. But I didn't just sit back. I quietly fanned the flames. I emailed the article about my dad's lawsuit to 3 people I knew he hated being vulnerable around: his pastor, his biggest client, and one of his golfing buddies who thrived on gossip. I made a new email account, no trace back to me, and signed it only, "Thought you should know." 2 days later, I checked the company's Facebook page. The comments were brutal. People were asking if the allegations were true, clients demanding refunds, even a few calling him a scam artist. As for Daniel, I knew he couldn't resist gambling even when he was broke. So, I quietly sent the casino picture to my mom's closest friend, the one who treated gossip like oxygen. Within 24 hours, half the town probably knew Daniel was blowing money while the family business crumbled. I didn't need to watch them suffer in person. The beauty of it was knowing they were unraveling without a clue I was behind it. Finally, the messages changed. No more commanding tones. No more guilt trips. My dad's voice lost its edge, my mom's cracked with worry, and Daniel finally sounded like a little boy again, not the golden child. The best part? They were all saying the same thing now. "Emily, please. We need you." It was everything I had waited for. And yet, instead of satisfaction, I felt something sharper: power. Now I just had to decide. When I finally answered, how would I make sure they never forgot who held it? I waited until a Friday night, after a 12-hour double shift, when my body was running on caffeine and spite. That's when I decided the time was right. I scrolled through the voicemails until I landed on the latest one from Daniel. His voice had been hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days. Please. We're in over our heads. I can't explain everything in a voicemail, but just call me back. I'm begging you. Begging. That was new. I took a long breath, pressed his name, and listened to the line ring. 1, 2, 3 times, then a frantic click. "Emily?" His voice cracked. "Yeah, it's me," I said, calm, almost bored. "You've left me a few messages." Thank God. I didn't know if you'd ever listen. Things are really bad. Dad's business, it's falling apart. He owes money to everyone. The lawsuits, the banks, hell, even the suppliers. And Mom's terrified. She doesn't know what to do. I let the silence hang. I wanted him to sweat. Finally, I asked, and what exactly does that have to do with me? Daniel stumbled. Because you're family. And you're the only one who might be able to help us right now. We need you. That word, need, hit differently. For years, I was treated like the extra, the one who was always supposed to sacrifice while Daniel got the rewards. And now, here he was, admitting they couldn't survive without me. I'll think about it, I said, my voice steady. But Daniel, this isn't going to be like before. If I even consider stepping back into that house, it'll be on my terms. Do you understand? He was quiet for a long moment before whispering, yeah. I understand. When I hung up, I felt a rush I can't describe. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten one, the one who owed. I was the one in control. And if they thought I'd come running out of kindness, they were dead wrong. This was just the beginning. I didn't drive home right away. That would have been too easy, too impulsive. No, if I was going to walk back into that house after 6 months of silence, I wanted every detail to work in my favor. The first step was appearances. Last time they saw me, I was broke, jobless, and begging for a place to stay. That image was burned into their minds, and I wasn't about to let them think I was crawling back the same way. So, I invested in myself. With the money I'd been saving, I bought a few sharp outfits, nothing flashy, but enough to make me look put together, confident. A blazer, clean shoes, a new bag that didn't look like it had been dragged across 3 states. I got my hair done at a small salon in Columbus, something I hadn't splurged on in years. When I looked in the mirror afterward, I barely recognized the girl staring back. She looked strong. Untouchable. Next, I gathered my leverage. I printed copies of everything I had on my dad's failing business, the lawsuits, the tax liens, even the anonymous comments from angry clients. I put them all into a neat black folder. Then I slipped in the casino photos of Daniel, just for good measure. That folder was my insurance. My shield and my sword. Finally, I practiced. In the mirror, in the car, even during my breaks at the diner. I rehearsed what I would say when they tried to guilt me, when they begged, when they offered empty promises. I knew their patterns, my dad's intimidation, my mom's tears, Daniel's charm. And I was ready for all of it. By the time I packed my car for the drive back, I didn't feel nervous. I felt sharp, focused, almost excited. I wasn't going home as the daughter they used to push around. I was going back as someone they had underestimated for too long. When I pulled onto the highway, the summer air hot through my window, I whispered to myself. They wanted me back. Now they're going to get me. But on my terms. The closer I got to my hometown, the tighter my chest felt. It wasn't fear exactly, it was something heavier, like the weight of all the years I'd spent being small in that house. But I wasn't small anymore. That was the difference. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was how different the place looked. The lawn was overgrown, weeds curling up the cracks in the walkway. My dad used to keep it pristine, the envy of the neighborhood. Now, it looked abandoned. I grabbed my black folder and stepped out of the car. The air was thick with humidity, and the cicadas screamed from the trees. I knocked once, and the door opened almost immediately. It was Daniel. His eyes widened like he was seeing a ghost. He looked rough, hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes, a faded hoodie that reeked of stale cigarettes. He said, voice low. You came. Yeah, I said coolly, brushing past him into the house. Looks like you've been waiting. The living room was chaos. Piles of unopened mail, dishes stacked in the sink, the faint smell of mildew hanging in the air. Mom sat on the couch, her face pale and drawn, like she'd aged 10 years in 6 months. Dad was in his recliner, but he didn't look like the man I remembered. His shoulders slumped, his eyes bloodshot, and for the first time, he didn't look in control. He looked beaten. Emily, Mom whispered, standing up with trembling hands. Oh, thank God you're here. Dad tried to straighten in his chair, to put on that old authoritative voice, but it cracked. We need to talk. I set the folder down on the coffee table, sliding it toward them like a dealer laying down cards. Yeah. We do. The silence that followed was thick, like all the years of unspoken resentment had finally filled the room. Their eyes flicked to the folder, but no one touched it. I leaned back in the chair across from them, crossing my legs slowly, deliberately. So, I said, my voice calm but edged with steel. Which one of you wants to tell me the truth first? The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. I let it stretch, let them feel the weight of my presence. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking under their stares, they were under mine. Dad cleared his throat first, his voice rough. The business, things didn't go as planned. Clients started pulling out. Then the lawsuits came. People talking, spreading lies. Not lies, I interrupted sharply, sliding one of the papers from the folder across the table. Court filings. Unpaid contracts. You can't spin those into fairy tales, Dad. He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside him, his knee bouncing. Look, it's not just Dad's fault. Things got complicated. I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. Complicated? You mean like blowing cash at a casino while the business was tanking? I pulled out the photo, laid it next to the filings. His face went pale. Emily, please, Mom cut in, her voice trembling. We know we've made mistakes. But we're family. Families help each other. I leaned forward, my tone flat. Families don't humiliate one child while handing everything to another. Families don't bail out 20 grand for Daniel and then chase me down for $1,500. So don't you dare talk to me about family. Mom's lip quivered, tears filling her eyes, but I didn't look away. Not this time. Daniel rubbed his face, finally breaking. All right, fine. I screwed up. I gambled. I thought I could fix things, win back what Dad lost. But I just made it worse. We're drowning, Emily. The house, the company, everything, it's all on the line. There it was. The truth, or at least part of it. I sat back, letting the silence hang heavy again. My father's shoulders slumped, Mom quietly sobbed into her hands, and Daniel looked like a man already half buried. And in that moment, I realized, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about rewriting the balance. For the first time in my life, I was holding the cards, and they knew it. The question was, how high was I willing to make them pay to get my help? I let the silence drag just long enough to make them sweat. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes, Mom sniffled quietly, and Daniel looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. For once, they weren't in control. Finally, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. All right, I said slowly. Let's say I do help. Let's pretend I care enough to get involved. If I do, it's going to be under one condition. Dad straightened, trying to find the old authority in his voice. We're listening. I smiled, not kindly. No. You're not listening. You're obeying. That's how this works now. The look on his face was priceless, shock, maybe even a little fear. My terms are simple, I continued. From this moment on, I don't owe you a damn thing. Not money, not respect, not loyalty. If I agree to lift a finger for this family, it's because you owe me. Daniel opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Don't speak. Just listen. You'll follow what I say without arguing. And if either of you ever try to pull the guilt trips, the favoritism, the manipulation, I tapped the folder with my finger. This information goes public. To every creditor, every neighbor, every person you still think looks up to you. Understand? Mom wiped her eyes, nodding frantically. Dad sat there stone-faced, but his silence was its own admission. Good, I said, sitting back. Because I haven't decided if I'm going to help you yet. I'll think about it. In the meantime, you'll do something you've never done before. They all looked at me, waiting. You're going to apologize. The word dropped like a hammer. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Mom whispered, Emily, we're sorry. Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel stared at the floor. I'm sorry too. Finally, Dad let out a shaky breath. His voice was low, forced. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I'm sorry. For the first time in my life, I had what I'd wanted all along, their acknowledgement. Their submission. Their apology. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The apologies hung in the air like smoke, thin, choking, and impossible to trust. I'd waited my whole life to hear those words, but I knew better than to believe them so quickly. My family had a way of bending the truth until it served them. So I decided to test them. Apologies are easy, I said, my voice steady. But if you mean it, you'll prove it. Daniel finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. How? I tapped the folder again. You've always expected me to carry the weight while you gambled and screwed around. So here's my first test. You're going to cut up every casino card you own. Tonight. In front of me. He blinked, his mouth opening like he wanted to argue, but then he closed it. He stood, walked to his room, and came back with a wallet stuffed with cards. One by one, he slid them out, his hands shaking, and sliced each one in half with the kitchen scissors. The sound of plastic snapping was like music to me. Good start, I said. Then I turned to Mom. You always let Dad set the rules and looked the other way. My test for you is simple. You're going to call Aunt Linda tomorrow and tell her the truth about the business. No sugarcoating, no excuses. If you can't be honest with your own sister, then your apology means nothing. Her face went pale. But. No buts, I cut in sharply. You said you were sorry. Prove it. Finally, I faced Dad. He'd been watching all of this in silence, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. And you, I said, locking eyes with him. You're going to admit, out loud, that you treated me like I didn't matter. That you favored Daniel. That you humiliated me. And you're going to say it where everyone here can hear. The room went still. For a moment, I thought he might explode. But then, slowly, he lowered his eyes and muttered, I treated you unfairly. I favored your brother. I should have been better. I'm sorry. The words sounded like they cost him blood. I leaned back, satisfied. They'd passed the first test, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Anyone can fake remorse once. The real challenge would be whether they could live with it. And that's where my revenge would take root. The tests were only the beginning. Their apologies had slipped out under pressure, but I knew if I wanted to make this stick, I had to keep them under my thumb. Words weren't enough. I wanted actions that proved they had changed, actions that cost them something. The next morning, I laid it out clearly. You want my help? I said at the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand. Then you'll follow 3 rules from here on out. Break any of them, and I walk away for good. They sat there, bleary-eyed, waiting. Rule 1, no more secrets. If I catch you hiding anything from me, business deals, gambling, lies, you'll regret it. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Mom nodded quickly. Dad just stared at his hands. Rule 2, accountability. Every Friday night, we'll sit down right here, and you'll show me everything, bank statements, debts, calls you've made. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone in town sees what's in that folder. Mom gasped quietly. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. And rule 3, I said, my voice sharp. Respect. No more treating me like the afterthought. If I hear one word of favoritism, one word of dismissal, I'm gone. You've lost that right forever. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the fridge. Finally, Daniel muttered, "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" I looked at him coldly. Enjoyment has nothing to do with it. This is survival. You taught me that. The crack in them began to show almost immediately. Mom called Aunt Linda later that day, voice trembling as she confessed the truth. When she hung up, she burst into tears, the kind that left her shaking. Daniel sulked around the house, snapping at me under his breath until I reminded him of the broken casino cards. And Dad, he barely spoke at all. Every time our eyes met, I could see the humiliation burning in him. And I loved it. But something else began to stir in me, too. As much as I relished seeing them bend, I wondered how long it could last. People like my dad didn't stay humbled forever. They bided their time. Which meant, if I wanted this revenge to stick, I'd have to decide whether to hold them under my control indefinitely, or finish breaking them once and for all. By the third week of my rules, the cracks in my family weren't just showing, they were splitting wide open. Daniel was the first to snap. At our Friday accountability meeting, he tossed his bank statement onto the table with a loud sigh. "This is ridiculous, Em. You're acting like some dictator. We said we were sorry. What more do you want from us?" I kept my voice calm. Consistency. Real change. Not the half-hearted crap you've given me my whole life. He shot up from his chair, fists clenched. "You're just enjoying this. You're not helping us, you're punishing us." I didn't flinch. "And you deserve it." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Mom quietly sobbing into her hands. Dad just sat there, eyes on me, like he was waiting to see how far I'd push. The next day, Mom broke. She cornered me in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, her hands clutching mine. "Emily, please. I can't take this anymore. I know we were wrong, but this isn't a family. This is torture." I pulled my hands free, my chest tight. Part of me wanted to give in, to hug her, to let her believe we could just erase the past. But another part of me, the part that remembered every cutting remark, every unpaid favor, every Christmas where Daniel's wins were my losses, stayed cold. "You created this," I told her. "You let it happen. You stood by and watched while Dad and Daniel crushed me. Don't cry to me now because the tables have turned." And then there was Dad. He hadn't yelled, hadn't argued, hadn't threatened me like I half expected. But one night, after dinner, he lingered in the doorway and said quietly, "You've made your point, Emily. But don't fool yourself into thinking control lasts forever. People like me, we don't stay down." It wasn't a threat, not exactly. It was a warning. That night, lying in bed, I realized the truth. I had pushed them to the edge. My revenge was working. They were fractured, raw, weaker than I'd ever seen them. But if I stopped now, they'd rebuild. They'd find a way to twist the story, to make me the villain, to slip back into their old roles. If I wanted this revenge to stick, to truly win, I'd have to decide whether to let them shatter completely or grant them the mercy they didn't deserve. I stared at the ceiling that night, Dad's words echoing in my mind. "People like me, we don't stay down." He was right. If I walked away now, they'd rebuild their lies, reshape the story until I was the ungrateful daughter who abandoned them. And maybe, just maybe, they'd even start believing it themselves. But something had shifted in me. Revenge wasn't just about breaking them anymore, it was about reclaiming myself. And that meant choosing what power looked like for me. The next morning, I gathered them in the living room. They sat in the same spots as when I'd first walked back into this house, only now they looked smaller, worn down. "I've thought about it," I said, holding the folder one last time. "And here's my decision." Their eyes locked on me, waiting, desperate. "I'm not here to save you. I'm not here to rebuild what you destroyed. That's your mess, not mine. I came here to show you what it feels like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of someone else's choices. And now you know. Mom's lips trembled. Daniel leaned forward like he wanted to argue, but Dad held up a hand, his face grim. I set the folder down on the table. This, I tapped it, stays with me. As long as I live, you'll remember that I could ruin you at any moment. That's my insurance. That's my freedom. Then I stood, grabbing my bag. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't need to. Because I don't need you. The silence was suffocating as I walked to the door. Mom whispered my name, Daniel muttered something I didn't catch, but Dad said nothing. He just sat there, staring at the folder, his empire of control reduced to ashes. When I stepped outside, the morning air hit me like a wave. For the first time in years, I felt light. Free. Powerful. Driving away, I realized my revenge had worked, not because I destroyed them completely, but because I'd broken the hold they had over me. They'd never see me as weak again. And that was the happiest ending I could have asked for.